Great Islander people to life in Yarra, and pay our collective respects to elders from all nations and to their elders past, present and future. So welcome everybody, welcome to tonight's webinar. The webinar is focused on campaigning for climate action to drive the recovery. And we've got three fantastic speakers talking you through three campaigns a little bit later in the night. Just to start, I'd like to run through some general housekeeping bits and pieces. We'd like you to keep your microphones on mute tonight, please. There will be an opportunity later to raise your hand and ask some questions, but just while the presenters are speaking, we'd really appreciate you keeping your microphones on mute, just to cut out any kind of background noise. The cameras are being kept off during the session because it's being recorded, and so this is really just to protect your privacy. We really encourage you to ask questions right through the session. You can ask questions of each of the presenters and general questions later in the evening as well. So to ask questions of the presenters, we would really like you to post these in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. You can use the chat function as well, but please use the chat to share links or interesting information or useful articles or anything that you'd like to share with the broader group attending tonight. The Q&A function is for questions for the panelists. And later on, we'll use the raise your hand function, but we'll talk you through that when the time is right. So tonight we're focusing on the opportunity we have right now to use the pandemic recovery and rebuild process to address the climate emergency, to use this opportunity to create a safe, healthy, prosperous and zero emissions future. And while the responsibility for the future sits with all of us, governments, business and communities are the government is fundamental to creating this future. And we want all levels of government deploying policy and economic measures that enable recovery from the pandemic and drive down carbon emissions while supporting the most vulnerable in our community. So the federal government's focus on a gas-fired recovery is really poorly suited to this. What we need actually is all levels of government using the pandemic recovery and rebuild to stimulate the industries of the future: renewable energy, electric vehicles, resource recovery solutions, water harvesting, environmentally sustainable housing, and sustainable transport infrastructure. And this is where you all come in, because we need each and every one of us to stand up and have our voices heard. We need to act together to ensure that our decision makers work to create a future that is safe and healthy for all. So tonight we're going to hear from three presenters, and we're going to hear about three different campaigns. And we encourage all of you to get involved with either, one or maybe some or all of the campaigns you hear about tonight. We really hope that in listening to the three speakers and the campaigns, that you hear something that really resonates with you, that's something that you can act on. Because as I said earlier, the well-being of the planet needs each and every one of us to take action. So I'd like to introduce our speakers. Firstly, I'll introduce Carol Wilkinson, and Carol's going to help me with the question and answer, and is going to help kind of co-moderate tonight. So Carol, please just give us a wave. Carol is an active member of our local climate group, Yarra Climate Action Now. She's represented what we call YCAN on several City of Yarra advisory committees. But in her day job, her day life, Carol is a children's author, best known for novels about dragons. But she's recently written a book called Atmospheric, which is a history of climate change for teens, and is currently working on a climate change book for younger readers. We have Lavanya Pant, who's the network organiser for Environment Victoria. Lavanya will be talking us through the Environment Victoria, the Build Back Better campaign, and talking about how Environment Victoria have been organising and bringing the community together in lockdown to take collective action, engage their MPs, and learn and build new campaigning and leadership skills. We have Lawrence Newman, the digital campaigner from Australian Conservation Foundation. So Lawrence has supported thousands of people all over to take climate action by contacting their local decision makers and urging businesses to do better. He's going to talk about ACF's Recover, Rebuild and Renew campaign and all the ways you can get involved. And I'm sorry, sometimes I do the Build Back Better and the Recover, Rebuild, Renew. Sometimes I get tongue-tied between those two. And so I'm sorry, Lavanya, for mixing that up with your little intro there. And Anna Langford, who is the convener for the Act on Climate group, which is part of Friends of the Earth. So Anna's going to be talking to us about the People's Climate Strategy. She's been a climate and union activist since she was 16 years old when she joined Friends of the Earth, Melbourne's campaign to ban onshore gas and fracking in Victoria. She's a passionate activist and, as I said, very active in the Friends of the Earth Act on Climate campaign. And she's campaigning, obviously, for strong climate action within Victoria and Australia. So I think with that, I'm going to hand over to Lavanya, and I'm going to ask Lavanya to talk us through the Environment Victoria's Build Back Better campaign and talk to us about what's involved with the campaign, what it's about, what it's trying to achieve, what it's responding to, and importantly, how each and every one of us can get involved. So thanks, Lavanya, over to you.
Great, thanks, Sam. Thanks for having me on the panel tonight. I also want to acknowledge that I'm calling in from the lands of the Kulin Nations and pay respect to elders past and present, and acknowledge the pivotal and ongoing role and struggles of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in caring for country and wildlife in Australia. So like Sam said, my name is Lavanya and I'm the network organizer at Environment Victoria. Some of you might already be quite familiar with EV. We're a state-based independent campaigns and advocacy organisation, and our vision is to be a leader and catalyst to tackling the climate crisis, achieve a healthy environment, and secure a fair and thriving future for Victoria. And you might be familiar with some of our ongoing flagship campaigns, which are Beyond Coal, which is focused on retiring all polluting coal power plants in Victoria by 2030. And then we also have Stop AGL's gas terminal. It's the Stopping AGL's gas terminal in Western Port Bay. And we also have campaigns on healthy rivers and energy efficiency. And this year, in the wake of COVID-19, we have launched Build Back Better, which is a campaign focused on ensuring that the COVID-19 economic recovery focuses on solutions that build a sustainable and fair future for us. So this campaign aims to address both the economic disruption to our lives and societies caused by coronavirus and subsequent lockdowns, and also actively promotes climate solutions that are a first step to tackling future crises. So our objective in its simplest form is to influence the state government to adopt job-creating climate solutions in Victoria's economic recovery. So one of the key elements of our strategy is to which volunteers are integral is building the people power that we need to win. We do this by mobilising people and communities across Victoria in a few ways. So we build volunteer leaders and provide resources so that any community in Victoria can become active in our campaigns. And we know that all around Victoria, communities want to combat the climate crisis. So we design campaigns that can be delivered in local communities by grassroots groups and leaders. And that all of this adds up to a massive state and federal impact. So essentially, our theory of change is that grassroots, local communities, when connected to strategic statewide campaigns, can together build power and the social and political leverage that is necessary to create the change we want in our society. So our volunteers and groups do a lot of the work by building relationships with their local representatives and MPs, and by learning the skills and creating power in their local community to effectively lobby them in a sustained way by using a range of different tactics. But we also hold events, and during COVID-19, a lot of online actions and tactics we have hosted to offer a space for our community all across Victoria to come together, talk about the issues that are important to them and what they would like to see in their recovery, and then take measurable collective actions. So, it's all adding up to a like a more scaled impact collectively. So over the last 3 weeks, we have been running air calling parties, and we've had about 8 now, and to our local and state MPs. So we've been making calls to our local representatives and to key ministers across Victoria to support and actively promote solutions that will create sustainable jobs in Victoria over the next few years. So for a bit of background, recently we launched an open letter to Premier Andrews and Treasurer Tim Pallas and asking them to commit to using this opportunity to ensure that the economic recovery delivers for our climate. And in the letter, we highlighted building clean energy infrastructure, sustainable transport, and making homes more energy efficient. Solutions that act as both job creators and community builders. And the Climate Council also recently released a report with detailed modelling showing that Victoria alone could create 15,000 clean stimulus jobs over the next 3 years through renewable energy, housing retrofits, transport, and so on. And we have also provided all MPs and key ministers and their advisors with a comprehensive policy document on how to actually implement these solutions. So in the last 3 weeks, when we held these calling parties, we had 40 people attend who made over 100 calls to their local representatives and some key ministers. And at least 20 MPs across Victoria have now heard from people in their electorate and community advocating for these solutions and telling powerful personal stories. And some people are also in a process of securing meetings with their MPs to continue the conversation in more depth. So in these calls, we asked MPs to publicly and internally support a climate-focused recovery and job creating solutions around that recovery. And of course, not all MPs agreed to doing this straight away, but it gives us something to follow up on, to continue lobbying and seek a relationship with our MP where we can move them on our issues with a bit of strategy and planning. So a lot of the attendees to these parties had never made calls to their MPs before, and we provided all the support and resources, plus the volunteers were able to peer share and learn from each other as they took action. So it was definitely a really big positive and inspiring to see what is possible even during a stage 4 lockdown and with all the barriers that we have at the moment for coming together. And another really inspiring aspect was that we had a lot of people from regional areas all over Gippsland, from Malakuta and other communities who have been impacted by the bushfires recently coming together with inner city folk, which wouldn't have happened if these events weren't online. And yeah, so they were having, like these people were calling their MPs and asking for solutions that would benefit their community and what they thought would benefit their community and what their community needed, and sharing personal stories, which all the policy documents to ministers, but without these personal stories, it's what actually sticks in your representative's mind. And some of those people, I'm sure, are going to continue lobbying their MPs on this. So the MP calling parties are now over, but we have all the resources necessary for people to DIY the calls and continue lobbying the MPs. And also me and our group of network support volunteers can support people one-on-one if they need any to call their MPs and continually lobby them. So yeah, we want to continue lobbying the MPs and ensure our representatives are consistently hearing from us and lots of people on how these solutions would benefit them or their households, their families and communities by creating jobs or restoring the environment or reducing energy bills or whatever it is that your community or you most need. And yeah, so we won't stop doing these calls. There's the October state budget coming up. So the state budget is a couple of months and people are already making decisions on what's going to be in that state budget, and this is a good time to put ideas out there. But we also know that this recovery is going to be a long-term thing. It's going to be over the next 2 years, and we have a lot of opportunity from here to present solutions and build a relationship with our MP and push for these solutions in a way where we can actually get into a more in-depth conversation and really present our personal stories to have that impact. So from here, we're going to be focused on 2 things. So firstly, connecting like-minded people with others in their area who want a climate-centered COVID recovery, and also equipping those people to get that message through to their local MPs. And to do this, we're holding 2 key events. So an info session where you can learn all about the campaign and meet other interested people, and also a one-on-one training to learn everything you need to lobby your MP about sustainable recovery measures. And we know Victorian decision makers are making these decisions about the recovery right now. So this is one of the most important things that community members and our volunteers are doing right now, and to see climate solutions. And if you want to join with other locals and advocate to your MP, we'd love for you to attend our info session. The sign-up pages aren't available yet as we're still finalizing dates, but the info session will be in about 3 weeks, and then the training will be in about 4 to 5 weeks. And yeah, that's all from me.
Thanks very much, Lavanya. So when you do have the information about dates and more specifics around the training session, would you send them to me, because then we can forward them on to the people who attend tonight? That would be great. And I guess I wanted to ask you a couple of questions. One is around are you've been targeting all the MPs in Victoria? Is that right? Yeah. Do you have a sense of how many calls have been made, and how many calls it takes to really shift an MP's perspective on a particular issue? Have you been able to kind of gauge that from previous campaigns?
Yeah, we've actually only been calling Labor MPs, and because the Labor Party is going to be making the decisions on the COVID recovery. But we have been asking people to do that first, and then call the Environment Minister and the Treasurer, but then call their local representatives who might be Greens, or if they have existing relationship with from another party, because those relationships can also be useful in those MPs also have the public platform and the internal platform within their parliamentary channels to write to the party that's in power. And so it's definitely worth, but like the Labor government is where you're going to have the most impact. So if you don't have a Lower House Labor MP, you can call, everyone has an Upper House Labor MP that they can contact. And as for how many calls it takes to have an impact, it's funny because it's really hard to measure that, because especially in a party like Labor where most MPs tend to toe the line. But also, I think sometimes we get feedback from MPs after 5 calls that a lot of people have been calling about your issues, because our campaigners and advocates are also meeting with them. And then sometimes some MPs will get like 50 calls and it won't even register that that many people have called them. So it really depends on your MP. But I think definitely the perceived power of once 5 or 6 or 10 people start calling on the same issue, or for an MP who doesn't get calls on this issue, the perceived power of how many people are getting together and talking about this issue is definitely like heightened in their minds. So even if they won't say it, sometimes even after 5 calls, people will be like, "Whoa, we're getting a lot of calls from you," which 5 people is not really that many. And I'm sure Anna and Lawrence will be able to speak to this a lot as well. Yeah, I'm not sure. It would be interesting to know how many calls people think it takes to shift people. But it's also about we've done another similar campaign when the emissions reductions targets decisions were due, and so we did a lot of MP meetings, and every MP in Victoria heard from us, and there was definitely a lot of talk that we heard from MPs internally, that we've all heard about your targets, which Anna and Fo also worked on those MP meetings with us. So with a couple of different community organisations or groups joined together, it can definitely have a huge impact as well.
So just to give a quick background to people, I guess, who may not know what the issue with the Victorian emissions targets are right now, do you want to give us a quick summary of what the issue is and where we're at with that?
Yeah, so Victoria was to set its emissions reductions targets for 2025 and 2030 by March this year. So in the Climate Change Act of 2017, that's the deadline that the government has given themselves. And so that decision was supposed to be made by March and announced in June. And they didn't announce it in June. And then the last legal deadline was the 6th of August. And they've said that they've indefinitely delayed it because of the pandemic and the priorities, which is understandable, but also not really, because we campaigned really hard before the pandemic happened to make this happen. And they had a 2-year window to set targets that would keep us under 1.5 degrees. And for Victoria to do their bit to keep global emissions under 1.5 degrees. So basically, it's been put in the back burner with we have no idea when it's going to be announced. Yeah, and so yeah, it's a bit it's disappointing. We have like another health and economic emergency, but you know this emergency is not going away, and so that's why we timed the calls around that. So that we made sure that MPs were hearing about us, being like people who were calling about the economic recovery were also saying that, you know, we know the climate targets decision deadline is coming up, and then also once it was delayed, a lot of people called and expressed disappointment to the Environment Minister, not to we're not targeting the Premier at the moment, but there will be a time for that when the emergency is over.
Yeah, nice one. So just to, I guess, summarize, Lavanya, for people who do want to get involved in the Build Back Better campaign and really work to ensure that the pandemic recovery is addressing the climate emergency, it'd be great for them to be involved in the information session that you have coming up, and then to join with others in their community to call and keep, I guess, petitioning, for want of a better word, their local MPs for the action that we want to see. So, so as we talked about, you could send the info to me and I can send it out, but equally people could just tune into the Environment Victoria website, could they, and get that information about when the information session is coming up?
Yeah, if you go, maybe hopefully next week to our events page, it should be there, but
Great.
we're still in the process of finalizing, so I'll send you to forward it to everyone as well.
Great, thank you so much. With that, we might move on to Lawrence Newman. So Lawrence, as I mentioned, is with Australian Conservation Foundation, and he's going to be talking about their campaign, which is called Recover, Rebuild and Renew. Over to you, Lawrence. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks for the opportunity to talk, and thanks everyone for coming out. Sorry. So yeah, just as like a quick intro, yep, my name is Lawrence. I'm a digital campaigner at ACF, and ACF, which stands for the Australian Conservation Foundation, we're Australia's national environment organisation. We've been around for about 55 years, protecting the places we all love, like the Great Barrier Reef and the Franklin River, and more recently, we've been working to help solve the climate crisis. So, recover, rebuild, renew. I know what you're thinking, another post-pandemic climate campaign with a 3-word alliterative slogan. Environment Victoria has the B's with Build Back Better. We have the R's with recover, rebuild, renew. I think it's great that we're both seizing this once-in-a-generation moment, taking this time of great disruption and running big, bold campaigns to set a better course for all of our futures. And it's not just us, it's also Friends of the Earth, who you'll hear from later with Anna, and WWF, Greenpeace, and like so many environment organisations across the country running these incredible campaigns. And unity brings momentum. I think that's really great because this isn't always the case. And it's such an important time for it to be the case. This year, our lives have turned upside down, climate damage and bushfires, a global pandemic and epic disruption. This is a critical juncture. History shows this level of disruption either leads to great change or great confirmation of the status quo. And right now is our moment. So we need to recover now with future-proof jobs that are good for our climate and nature. We need to rebuild our economy so our communities and nature are healthier and more resilient in the face of climate disruption. And we need to renew our energy system so it's clean and renewable, and there's plenty to share for the rest of the world. We need to recover, rebuild, renew. Our governments can play a massive role here. Governments can give many thousands of people jobs installing solar panels, restoring degraded rivers, parks and wetlands, laying bike paths and weatherproofing schools and homes. They can give us environment laws that actually protect our nature because they don't right now. They can ditch digging and burning coal and gas and renew our energy system so it's clean and renewable, and export it to the rest of the world. So we have a recover, rebuild, renew agenda with 20 specific actions, including the above, that we want our governments to put in place in 3 phases before the next federal election. There should be a link to this popping up in the chat. Yep. So my colleague and superhuman Joel Mullen-Tribe is going to post these links in the chat. Thank you, Joel. You're a legend. So on that link on page 6, it has the 20 specific actions we're asking of all governments, state and federal, to take. 3 phases, now into the October budget, then next year's budget, 2021, and then until the the next federal election, whenever that is. Business can also play a big role. Big businesses like banks, super funds, insurers, they pour lots of money, often our own money, into coal and gas burning projects. It's in development, hoping for a September release. We wanted to sign our Recover Renew business agenda and commit to exiting fossil fuels and investing more money into clean energy and projects that look after our forests and rivers. Things that consider biodiversity impact as well. We also want small and medium businesses to play a role, sign the agenda and take action. So things like taking grants, like government grants to go solar, or even get like worm farms, put a poster up in their shop front, as well as build momentum for recovery, build, renew. We know a lot of decision makers, especially Morrison government decision makers, they are influenced and they listen to business. So getting business to support recovery, build, renew will go a long way to making it happen. Speaking of which, how are we making this happen? ACF community groups all across the country are meeting with their local, state and federal decision makers. They're talking through the agenda with them and asking them to support it, advocate for it in the party room, get their Premier/Prime Minister to adopt it, and block negative policies like burning more climate-wrecking gas. They're not just meeting once, they're building relationships with decision makers and they're pushing them to take these actions over time. They're meeting together as groups and they are prepared on how to make a meeting successful, whatever their role, because they've attended Meet Your MP training. At the moment, our groups are averaging about half a dozen meetings with decision makers a week. That's a better rate than our 2019 election campaign, and it's been done all while during isolation. So it's a really good effort. We're really excited by that. Lav just talked about Environment Victoria's numbers. They've met with heaps of Victorian state MPs. So it all builds together. So if you want to get involved in the Recovery, Build, Renew campaign and push for climate action as part of our recovery, the best way is to join your local group and go to an MP meeting. Your local group will depend on where you live. The Inner Melbourne group is based in Richmond. ACF Burundara is in Hawthorn. ACF Series is they're in Brunswick. ACF Macnamara is in St Kilda. Being in Yarra, you get a lot of options, but you can also start your own group. To either start your own group or join your local group, you can go, link in the chat already, acf.org.au/community_groups. And we're also running Meet Your MP trainings fortnightly that you can sign up to once you join or start your own group. And it hasn't started quite yet, but our groups are also going to be meeting with small businesses like they're meeting with MPs. We're going to try and get them to sign up to the Recovery, Build, Renew agenda and also come to MP meetings with them. So eventually MP meetings will have our community group members, small businesses from the area meeting with MPs to discuss that agenda, getting them to advocate for it, adopt it, and block bad policies. The other really good way to get involved coming up is we're going to have our first digital town hall about Recovery, Build, Renew. We're all going to come together. Our CEO, Kelly O'Shaughnessy, is going to speak, so is our campaign leaders. Then we're going to break off into different groups, little breakout rooms. There's going to be one about nature, one about Queensland because of the state election there, and then one about climate. And all together, we're going to have a bit of a community discussion and then take action together. So the details aren't final yet, but if you join our mailing list, you'll get an invite as well as an invite to all our events. And the best way to join our mailing list is to sign our Recover, Rebuild, Renew petition. Link is in the chat there. A few ways to get involved. I also just want to finish with why I think you should get involved, why it's important. Us as people need to lead the change, otherwise it won't happen. Governments can enact laws to recover, rebuild, renew, and do a lot of good for people and communities, but only if we push for it and make sure our decision makers properly represent us. Right now, lifetime gas lobbyist Nev Power is helming the National COVID Coordination Commission, the NCCC, that's advising our government how to respond to COVID. That's kind of ridiculous. Gas is a climate disaster. We don't want that. And we need to speak out now. And speaking out makes a difference because our governments have a choice. They listen to the polluters or they listen to the people. So you might not have heard about this, but there's a big climate vote happening in the Senate. It's a vote to either save or weaken our only clean energy laws, the Clean Energy Finance Corporation and the Australian Renewable Energy Agency. These are incredible laws. They funnel millions of dollars of investor money into clean energy technology and projects. In less than a decade, these laws came into effect about 2012 under the Gillard government of being created. They've powered 12,238 clean energy projects all over the country. If you go onto this Clean Energy Finance Corporation website, you can see all the projects they've made. My personal favorite is in Port Augusta, where they're now using world-leading solar thermal technology to grow tomatoes, 17,000 tons of tomatoes to be exact, and growing. Lots of cool projects. I recommend going and checking it out. And yeah, I said the vote is to weaken these laws. That's kind of an understatement. Weaken here means changing the remit of these clean energy laws so they also finance gas. It's literally taking out only clean energy laws and then using them to put money into a climate disaster, stinky planet-killing gas. And the reason I bring up this example is because a few weeks ago, thousands of people in the ACF community from all over the country emailed their decision makers and asked them to save these laws. One week later, Labor leader Anthony Albanese came out in the media and said that, you know, the party-wide Labor, they're going to defend these vital clean energy laws. The fight isn't over. We'll still need more decision makers to defend these laws and be successful on this vote. But it was a really good result and a really good example of our decision makers listening to us, the people. So at the very least, I really recommend signing up to our mailing list so you can participate in these kinds of moments and have your voice heard. We run actions like this every week or second week, and it's a great opportunity for us as thousands of people who care about climate change to be heard and make a real impact together. So again, to sign up to the mailing list, sign the Recover, Rebuild, Renew petition. Link is in the chat, acf.org.au/economic_recovery_petition. I only know that because I may have made that URL. Otherwise, I wouldn't know that. Sorry, I just thought it'd be weird that I remember URL. Anyway, thank you so much for listening. People power our campaigns, and it will take all of us to recover, rebuild, renew. I hope we can count you in. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Lawrence. So just, I know you've just said it, but in summary, people can join the mailing list, people can join their local ACF group, people can sign the petition which you've mentioned, and people can join the digital town hall meeting which you have coming up. And I guess in relation to the local group and the town hall meeting, people would find that information on your website. Yeah.
Yeah, the town hall, we don't have details 100% finalised. I think there's going to be an invite early next week. So sign the petition and join the mailing list, please.
Great. And just like I said to Lavanya, when you do have details of the town hall meeting, please send them through, because with the details Lavanya is going to send through, we can pass them on to people who've attended tonight's session. So we've got a couple of questions from the audience, and I guess the first question from Gabriel, we might direct that to both Lavanya and Lawrence, and I'll just say very quickly, thank you. Sorry, Anna, and sorry to keep you kind of waiting for a little while, but we'll be with you in just a tick. But I might see if my local kind of Yarra colleague, Carol Wilkinson from Yarra Climate Action Now, might like to ask this first question from Gabriel to the two panellists we've heard from so far.
Thanks, Sam. So this is from Gabriel, and she, I think, says, I live in the Latrobe Valley and have many friends who worked at the Hazelwood Power Station. I personally am happy to see the closure and possibly the Delburn wind farm if the size of the turbines are reduced. Are you considering how job losses and the personal impact, for example, of the residents close to the turbines, of community members who are not necessarily climate deniers, just concerned about the impact of job loss and turbine noise, property value losses are feeling when you develop strategies? One key factor that I feel as a community worker in food security is empathy, consistent evidence, gentle persuasion, and information via local newspaper and radio. So not exactly a question, but perhaps a response required for that.
Lavanya, do you have a comment? Would you like to go first
Yeah.
there? Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
can comment on that because we actually do. So because it's a our Victorian campaign Beyond Coal focuses on retiring power plants, and it's not something that we our focus. One of the main objectives is a just transition for the Latrobe Valley, and one of the ways that we're trying to do this, it's not retiring them at any cost, but it's only retiring them only with a just transition. And one of the ways that we're doing is we have a Latrobe Valley organizer who is building another campaign in the Latrobe Valley, which isn't called Beyond Coal. The Beyond Coal is more focused on, getting people to start thinking about clean energy and uh, moving governments to close polluting power stations. But what they do in the Latrobe Valley is a very different campaign. And one of the groups that have formed out of that organising is called Communities Leading Change. And our organiser, Laura Melville, she is from the Latrobe Valley, and her family, a lot of her people, her friends and family are all from that region, and they were impacted by the bushfires this year as well. So the communities leading change, starting to have, they do monthly potlucks, and they were doing a lot more events together to have conversations about what, a just transition might look like. And it's not that, everyone's like, I'm up for transitioning away from coal and doing another job, but it's actually involving people in conversations about what the future could look like, and it also includes building resilient communities. Yeah, and then another groups that's just started there is Flow, which is Friends of Latrobe Water, which Laura is also working with and has helped start. And they do, talk more about the impact that the power plants have on the water in the Latrobe Valley. And then another piece of the work that they're doing over there is working with a Gunai Kurnai person to lead on building relationships between people who are impacted by the power plant closures, or just other issues, environmental issues in the Latrobe Valley, and building relationships and having conversations with Gunai Kurnai people in that region as well. So it's like more of a very long-term organizing plan, and it's very different to the work we're doing and offering to people in non-impacted areas. But yeah, and we can read more about that on our website as well.
Terrific. Thank you, Lavanya. That was really useful information. Thank you. Lawrence, is there anything you want to add to that, or any comments you'd like to make in relation to that kind of comment from Gabrielle?
I reckon Lav knocked it out of the park, but just really quickly to echo what she said, and good question, Gabriel. Yeah, I think a lot of the times when we're transitioning, a lot of these coal stations, they're in rural communities where there might be less jobs, and this is a really important thing to consider. We don't campaign specifically in the Latrobe Valley, but we have a similar campaign we run in Gladstone in central Queensland, a lot of coal there, and again, it's lots of community consultation, conversation about what a just transition is, and being really respectful and considerate of that, and working with people.
Nice one. Thank you. So I might just ask one more question, and then I'd like to bring Anna into the discussion. Anna, and again, thank you for your patience in waiting. But Colin asks, in addition to reducing emissions from energy production, another obvious way to get emissions down and build back better in Victoria is to speed up the transition out of native forest logging. Logging produces around 4 megatons of carbon a year, so stopping logging stops this release of emissions. Repaired forests would take up another 4 megatons of carbon per year every year. Victorian Labor already has a plan to transition out of native forests, but over 10 years, each year, this costs Victorian taxpayers money. How could transition out of logging be part of Build Back Better, or Recover, Rebuild, Renew? So how could the transition out of logging be part of either of the campaigns? So again, Lavanya, I might pass to you first, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's not something that Environment Victoria is campaigning around at the moment. So our focus has been a lot on power and not so much on the nature aspect of it, although I understand that you're asking this from an emissions lens as well. So currently, because of our capacity, we are not focusing on logging, but I think good question, and good to think about how a transition could be part of Build Back Better. If Anna or Lawrence, if you have anything to add.
Yeah, I might bring Anna in here. Anna, sorry to bring you in on a question rather than a presentation, but I'm wondering if you have any comments around how a transition out of logging could be part of this opportunity, you know, this post-pandemic recovery opportunity.
Yeah, no worries. Bit of a sneak preview, but yeah, I'm sure what I'm saying will make more sense after I present as well.
Sorry, Anna.
No. Yeah, so in the work that we do at Friends of the Earth, yeah, we see transitioning out of logging sooner than the date that Labor has given as essential to meeting the high emissions reduction targets that we have been campaigning for and that we know are essential to keep global warming below 1.5 degrees. And yeah, I guess it's an especially tricky political issue, and it has been for decades, but I think it's really good that now that there is the framework for the just transition, it's I guess it'll come down to what happens over the next few years to kind of consolidate that timeline, which actually, you know, it doesn't make sense for the amount of native forest that's left. And I think one thing that has really shaken that up is the bushfires last summer, which decimated a lot of the reserved protected area that included in that transition plan. And obviously also with jobs, most of logging jobs in Victoria are currently in plantation. There aren't many left in native forest logging actually. And so it's another good sign that, yeah, there's already this viable alternate industry set up that, along with others, other jobs that workers can be transitioned to. And I can't speak to it in too much detail because it's not something I specifically campaign on, but in terms of the emissions reduction aspect of it, that's always something that we include in our in our campaigning and in our conversations with Victorian Labor about that they're not actually optional. This has to be included if we're to meet the science-based targets that we need to legislate. Oh, you're on mute, Sam.
Sorry. Yep, sorry. As I say, thank you. And before I ask you to carry on with a presentation, I wondered if, Lawrence, you have any final thoughts on transitioning from logging as part of the Recover, Rebuild, Renew campaign?
Keep it obviously short. Yeah, Recover, Rebuild, Renew is a climate and a nature campaign, and I can't really zero in on logging, but if the question, I believe the question is about logging in relation to emissions. One of the big parts of the campaign is, right now we have a once in a decade review, independent review of our national environment laws that are a bit broken. They're not really protecting nature. They don't even mention climate change. And we have an extinction and a climate crisis, and that connection hasn't been made at a legislative level or even a lot of the time at a campaigning level. So I think that's a link that needs to keep being pushed.
Thank you. I think with that, we'll let Anna take it away and yeah, talk to us about the Act on Climate and People's Climate Strategy work that she's doing. Thanks, Anna.
Cool, thank you, Sam. And I'm actually just going to quickly share my screen because I have some slides, so feel free to do a couple of star jumps or whatever while I do that. Yeah, hope this works for everyone. Cool. Yeah, otherwise I'll give all the same info talking anyway. Yeah, so thank you, Sam, and thanks so much to Yarra Libraries for putting on this forum. It's really nice to be here again with you all because, yeah, I spoke on another one a couple of weeks ago that Yarra Libraries had on, also on like climate action in Victoria. And it feels like weird that I haven't actually met you in person yet. But yeah, it's nice to see everybody's faces still. I'd also like to acknowledge that I'm talking tonight from Wurundjeri country in Preston, and acknowledge that we have to centre First Nations justice as part of all the climate justice work that we do. So my name's Anna. I'm from Friends of the Earth's Act on Climate Collective. And Friends of the Earth is an organisation that is the largest environmental grassroots action network in the world. We're active in 76 countries, and in Australia we've been around for 45 years, rabble-rousing and making change. And I'm just going to quickly tell you about, in Victoria, what we've been up to for the last decade. It's going to be 10 years in 10 seconds pretty much, just to give the context of what we're campaigning on now and how we got to that point. So like when I joined Friends of the Earth nearly 7 years ago now, I stumbled into one of the most amazing campaigns I think that this state has ever seen, which was the campaign to ban onshore gas, and fracking in Victoria. So yeah, talking about like how the federal government wants to now lead a gas-fired recovery. Farming communities all over Victoria know all too well how badly that would go. And over 5 years, we mobilised rural farming communities all over the state to fight for this dangerous onshore gas industry to be banned, in particular the dangerous fracking technology, which involves like drilling down to get gas with like truckloads of chemicals and water, and basically poisons the land and makes it completely unviable. And it was an amazing campaign to be part of because it was like primarily made up of what we really think of as like unusual suspects in the climate movement, which were like, yeah, for the most part, farming communities that many of which had never been involved in any kind of activism before. And at the same time as that campaign was going, we had this other campaign for a renewable energy target for Victoria, which started in the midst of Victoria being quite a hostile place for new renewable energy. We had Premier Napthine bringing in like anti-wind farm laws with all of these different stupid rules and regulations that didn't make any sense and were basically just about clinging to a fossil fuel past. And so these two campaigns kind of worked as twin campaigns for about 6 years. And finally in 2016, they were both won, and we got a ban on fracking in Victoria, which is the only one in Australia so far, I think. And also, yeah, a renewable energy target, which now is able to keep being extended. And so when these both wrapped up, the interesting thing was that even though they were both, you know, talking about climate change, like things that either contribute to climate change or the solutions to it, neither of them actually really centered climate change in the messaging. And that's because like basically the communities we were working with, the literacy just wasn't quite there yet about what climate change was going to do to Victoria. Like it still seemed like kind of too much of a far away in the future thing. And so basically the year after that, myself and another campaigner at Friends of the Earth started up the Act on Climate Collective to actually specifically start talking about climate change in Victoria and basically make it here and now instead of something far away and, you know, like melting ice caps or stuff that's just going to happen in 50 years' time. And our mission at Act on Climate is pretty simple. it's to make Victoria the national leader on climate action, while we have a federal government that is just like so impossible to work with on so many fronts. And what we've done for the last 3 years is work pretty much to make a quite niche state policy into a powerful community campaign that the government can't ignore. And that was campaigning for Victoria to set science-based 2025 and 2030 emissions reduction targets. So as Lavanya touched on, that the government's required to set these interim 5-yearly targets under the Climate Change Act 2017. And yeah, like we were pushing for them to be high enough that they're actually based on the science of keeping warming below 1.5 degrees instead of just like arbitrarily low, and that won't really get us anywhere. And yeah, as Lavanya also said, that campaign was meant to culminate this year in those targets actually being decided on and set. But in a terrible, like unpredictable coincidence, the week that Cabinet was actually meant to decide on the targets was also the week that Melbourne and Victoria went into the first round of lockdown in March. And as we found out, that Cabinet meeting to set the targets, it just didn't happen because we were in the midst of responding to this pandemic. And yeah, like we couldn't have planned for it. And I think the lucky thing is in this story is that unlike a few other bad outcomes we've seen kind of snuck through over the last few months, the acronyms, the emissions reduction targets were not snuck through as like, you know, just too low targets in any of this time. They are still to be set, and I think that is testament to the really strong campaign that was run by community members all over the state. But what I'm really here to talk about tonight is the project that we are running at the moment, which is basically meant to be the action plan to make these targets happen, to put them into action when they're set. And it's called the People's Climate Strategy for Victoria. And why this has come about is basically that also as part of the Victorian Climate Change Act, the Victorian government has to write a climate strategy for the state by the end of October this year. And it involves them having to look at how every economic sector and region in the state can cut emissions in line with the emissions reduction targets. So yeah, this is actually like legislated, the mechanism's already there, they have to do it. But yeah, like because the game has changed so much and we are in the situation that we're in with COVID, our concern was, well, you know, will the strategy even get the attention it deserves? Will it be written on time? And like, will enough focus go into it by the government? And so we thought that we would, you know, take it off their hands, and we thought, why not write it ourselves as a people's climate strategy? And that's what we've been doing for the last couple of months, in really weird circumstances, embarking on this this goal to write the first ever People's Climate Strategy for Victoria. And what we're going to do is present it to the Andrews government in October and basically be like, we've done your homework, we've got all these good ideas, here you go, like take it away. And as part of that, it's not going to be just like sprung on them at the end either. We're actually already meeting with the people in the government department tasked with writing the strategy and telling them, you know, this is what we're doing, and they're actually really excited about it and are asking us to like share what comes out of it. And so I'll just talk quickly about how we're actually doing it. Basically, our first month of focus was on the climate impacts already appearing in Victoria, such as the accelerating coastal erosion down in Gippsland in Inverloch. And yeah, we work on the principle basically that no one knows a community better than the people in it, and climate change is going to impact every Victorian community differently. And so we had a survey that people could fill out talking about what climate impacts they are most worried about in their local area, and like, yeah, ones that they're already seeing, to really get that local community knowledge drawn out. And this month, the focus is now on the climate solutions that people want to see the Victorian government embrace as part of the strategy, whether for their local area or for their region or for the whole state. And so, yeah, it's like a bottom-up grassroots sourcing of solutions that, you know, makes sense for the areas that people want to see them in. And basically the first way that people can take part in that is with this Ideas for Action social media action, where people can send in a COVID-safe selfie and also in 30 words or less the big idea that they want to see as a climate solution. And after that, we've got like a more detailed climate solutions survey available for people to fill out. And it's good because it means stuff like, you know, we can make it available in different languages to reach out to a diversity of Victorian communities and profile like the diversity of people that want to see climate action in the state. And so, yeah, I'm gonna wrap up in a minute, but yeah, basically like those two actions are both available for people to do as like entry points. You can do the Ideas for Action selfie action and still do the climate impact survey if you'd like to contribute to the strategy. And the other thing that we're rolling out over the next month or so is a series of forums looking at each economic sector in Victoria and looking at how that can cut emissions, create thousands of climate jobs, and tackle disadvantage and like embody climate justice principles. And this is good timing because the first one's actually next Thursday night, and I'll post the link in the chat for how people can RSVP and come along to that. But yeah, if energy sector's not your bag, then there'll be plenty of others to come along to. So yeah, to wrap up, like I would love everybody here to be part of this strategy in any way that you'd like to, whether it's just sending in a selfie, taking the impact survey, or being involved in more ways. Like we'll be kicking off a series of meeting local MPs meetings, you know, when things have calmed down a bit, as well as these forums and lots of other stuff. And if you'd like to be more involved also, we have weekly meetings every Monday night on Zoom. And yeah, like happy to be contacted about those as well. But yeah, basically there's lots happening. I'm feeling really excited about it despite the circumstances. And though it may sound like just a kind of nitty-gritty piece of policy that's a bit far from reality, it will actually have real world impacts. And if we show the government that we're paying attention and really putting in and expect good ambition, then I think we can really win with this. So thank you so much. And I hope lots of you would love to be part of it.
Thanks so much, Anna. And I love that idea of taking a selfie and sending it in with the big, you know, your own big idea about, you know, for a climate solution. That's really creative and yeah, fun thing to get involved. And thank you for the other ideas as well. So I guess just for a quick rundown, it's about, you know, the selfie, taking your photo and sending it in with a big idea, completing the solutions survey, joining one of your meetings on a Monday night, but also tuning into your forums which focus on different sectors in the community and how they can cut emissions. Brilliant. Thanks so much, Anna. And the links, I can see that you're popping in the chat function, so terrific. I might ask my friend from Yarra Climate Action now, Carol, if she'll I guess, start with the first question in this section, and it's a question from Dawn. You're on mute, Carol. Sorry. Happens to all of us.
Sorry.
That's okay.
So Don's got a couple of questions.
Yeah, we might ask about one about the just transition, given that Anna just mentioned climate justice right at the end of her
Okay.
chat.
So it seems that all environmental GPS refer to a just transition as a basic strategy, but this strategy doesn't seem to have got through to the politicians or the general public. Rather, we are seen as job destroyers. Any thoughts, re how we can cut through more to gain public support?
Anna, did you want to make a first comment on that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's a really good and frustrating point, how like that line continues to be towed by conservative media and politicians, even though I think like for a large part it's really untrue. And I guess like, as I think, yeah, is the case with EV and ACF, like the work should really be about like elevating the voices of community members who are going to be impacted by like, you know, job losses, whether from transitioning or from climate impacts. And yeah, just like in people in these frontline communities that are often spoken about but aren't handed the microphone. And that's like really what we're trying to do with the People's Climate Strategy, is to get the voices included of like a really diverse bunch of Victorian communities, and actually just like try and give them the platform to talk about the solutions they want to see locally and what they're worried about. And I think also like there's already examples of exciting stuff happening that is like, it's the stuff that's being led by community members that is giving power back to the locals and to workers. And that's things like the Earthworker Cooperative in the Latrobe Valley, which are producing solar hot water systems. And they're a workers cooperative that has been around for about 20 years, and a lot of, quite a few ex-Hazelwood workers are now there doing this work that like is not just about transitioning away from fossil fuels, but about transitioning away from the corporate power held over the energy sector since you know, the State Electricity Commission was disbanded a few decades ago. And there are now these big companies in there that like don't actually really care that much about workers' rights either. And so we want to actually like flip more than just the fossil fuels. We want to change the whole model, which involves centering workers' justice.
Thank you. Anna, Lawrence or Lavanya, did you want to add any comments to Anna's answer? You don't need to, but
No, I don't really have anything to add, but just yeah, definitely agree and emphasize on that point that a lot of the that change and the ask for transition, or like talks, just conversations about transition at all, should be coming from the communities that are impacted by it, and what other people can do is amplify those voices, and yeah, and just, you know, seek direction or leadership from those communities on how to do that as well.
thank you. You know, Anna, I was interested in when you talked about when you first came to Friends of the Earth, that the first campaign that you were part of was an anti-fracking campaign. And I guess I wanted to ask you about state gas moratoriums and whether they're able to really protect against new gas projects. So I wondered if you could give us a little, you know, a quick rundown on what is a state gas moratorium, how it works, and whether it provides any protection or not. And, you know, when we're thinking about a gas-fired recovery, or, you know, does that provide any protection when the federal government is pushing for a gas-fired recovery?
Yeah, thanks for that, Sam. So basically, a moratorium is not permanently barring an industry from the state. Moratorium just means temporary ban. And it's what was originally put up in Victoria when the resistance to fracking started like about 10 years ago, because the gates were just going to be opened to the industry. But then like all these farming communities started agitating, and the government, the Liberal government at the time, was like, you know, okay, quick moratorium, bring it in, we'll decide later. And yeah, it took like that many years of campaigning to see one of the strongest bans on fracking in the world brought in. But unfortunately, fracking is just one technology that can be used to extract gas from the ground. And yeah, people might have seen that earlier this year, the temporary moratoriums on onshore and offshore gas, it's been announced that they will both be lifted in one form or another next year, which was a big blow in the middle of all this. But like, I think that luckily, because such a big campaign was run to ban fracking, with 75 communities around the state declaring themselves gas field free during that campaign, like we will hopefully be able to hold this off and keep this from starting up in Victoria too, because yeah, it's like it's not currently really an existent industry in the state, and like it's just been demonstrated so strongly that rural and regional communities don't want it, and that it's like it completely goes against protecting Victoria's food bowls and natural places. So yeah, there's a Friends of the Earth campaign that has started up this year and is ramping up about that exactly, like keeping all gas, not just fracking, out of the state. And yeah, if you'd like to be part of that as well, then it's on the Friends of the Earth Melbourne website. There's a great team that's starting up to, yeah, really like put the pressure on, steer us away from a gas-fired recovery. And it's also something that like we'll be including in the climate strategy, is that like it completely contradicts the fact that the Vic government have legislated the Climate Change Act. You know, you can't bring a new fossil fuel industry and have a commitment to lower emissions and get to zero emissions.
Thank you. That actually, I think, is a nice segue into the next question, also from Don, and I might ask Carol to put this question forward. But it's you know, it's in relation to Victoria's position as a national leader or not in climate action. So, I might hand over to you, Carol.
So Don says, is making Victoria the national leader in climate action an influential lever on Labor politicians, given state pride is being seen as progressive?
Yeah, that is definitely part of the strategy, honestly, because like, yeah, while we have a federal government that is just like is taking us completely the opposite direction we need to be going, and embarrassing us on the international stage, it's like it's a lucky thing that we have state governments that are able to, that have these powers where they're able to make quite a lot of change internally, regardless of the federal government's actions. And so like, yeah, for example, the states like basically control things like energy and land use and waste. And so like, yeah, it's really like to get people to focus on the change that can be made at the state level when they're feeling so disempowered about what's happening federally. And yeah, while there is no Labor government federally, then we are really trying to put it to the Andrews government that, hey, you know, you can be the hero here and take us on the right path, and like show what can be done, that the world won't fall apart when we transition away from fossil fuels, and like make these changes that will benefit our communities as well as the environment.
I hope that appeal to the Victorian ego is a winning strategy. Um, we've got time for another couple of questions, but I also thought I might encourage people, if they would like to tell us about this, people in our audience tonight, if you've heard something tonight that really resonates with you, or one of the campaigns has really stood out to you, and there's a particular action that you think that you would like to take, please pop it into the chat function. We'd really love to know what you're thinking and what you think you might do, what action you might take. But equally, you can, if you'd like to talk about that rather than write it, there's a raise your hand function on Zoom as well. You'll find it under participants. Just raise your hand, it'll show up, and my colleague Danny will unmute you, and you can speak about I guess, like I said, what's resonated with you and what action you might take. So yeah, so either in the chat function or raise your hand. But while we're I guess waiting for people to do that, I might just ask one more question, and this is to everybody on the panel, and it's really about taking action at this time when everything's moved to online and we can't meet face to face. And I guess there's not the opportunity for the direct action protests or being in the street. So, pardon me. So, have you come across other ways that we can get politicians' attention? Would it be suitable, for instance, to request a meeting with them, or all of us request a meeting and flood their diaries? Would it be possible to turn up to their office in some kind of virtual way? Or, I guess really what people are asking here is, are there creative ideas that you've come across in this online space to cut through and grab the attention of politicians, but I guess equally grab the attention of the broader public as well? Anyone? Yeah, open to all three of you if you've got some good ideas to share there.
I can have a go at this one. So definitely at the start of the first lockdown, there was a big scramble to do creative online actions, and we saw a lot of really cool, like Zoom protests where like hundreds of people attended, and people had like these really creative signs, and people made a human signs with different shapes for we know, especially at EV, in the Save Western Port crew, in our Stop AGL gas terminal campaign, people had planned a sign on in Western Port, but that didn't coincided with the first lockdown, so they moved it online quite successfully. But the only difference with that, and then they tweeted it to the MPs, which they would have done anyway, so it didn't have that visual impact of doing it on the actual affected area, but it was really powerful to see that people who previously, and a lot of people haven't used Zoom before, people always met in person, and it was like a big learning curve, but people rose to the challenge and did that, and that was I'm sure as impactful for MPs to see, while they were lifting the gas moratorium the day after the lockdown happened, that all these people who were willing to just jump online and do the action anyway and have that impact. And I think tweeting the politicians, sending them the photos would have had a really similar impact. There's lots of other cool actions that I've seen people, but I would also say that like another great opportunity that's come from this is that people have a lot of free time, which people never do. And often what we find is that like you do really cool actions, but you can't convince enough people to come to the action or be like super committed to the action. But it's given everyone time to slow down and have conversations. And it sounds really funny, but most people have, like, more people have come together, and we've had people come together from across Victoria and have really deep one-on-one relational conversations in the webinars that we organise and in the little breakout rooms, and which just doesn't happen on a weekly or monthly basis when we're not in a pandemic. So it's also a really good time to build relationships that will last after this is over, and that is the most like relationships come before action in pretty much all of our campaigns. So
yeah, I agree, Lavanya. I think forming that rapport and those relationships is fundamental, isn't it? Because then you become the trusted source of information, and people really want to work with you and do things together. So I totally agree. I have a question from Shane here, and that's just generally about people power. So the system, there are so many things that need reform. Is people power enough? will we get there? Will people power get us there, do you think? Anna, can we start with you maybe?
Wow, big questions for Thursday nights. Yeah, like, I mean, I wish that we were taught like about history and in a different way in school and stuff a lot of the time, and about how change happens, because like if you look back, you know, pretty much all change that has ever occurred to better societies like was the result of long campaigns run by people all over the world, and like, you know, it was never just handed out. And like in terms of kind of, you know, do you go for reformism or all at once? I just like I tend to think that like change is always incremental, and like it happens in different ways like than we can predict really. And especially like with the kind of change that we want to create, where there's so many things at the same time that we're trying to transform and change. I think I'm doing a lot of meditating right now on my favorite activist author, Rebecca Solnit, who talks about like the way that, you know, change in the real world doesn't happen in a kind of linear, you have input, you get a direct output way. It more happens in a like, you have input, and then you have like, you know, you might not get the result you want for years or decades, or it might come up in a completely unexpected bigger way, and then the change might keep going from what you started and result in other unexpected things that weren't even connected to what you originally started with. And like I think about that in the way that Greta Thunberg talks about the civil rights activists in the United States that she was inspired by. And, you know, you can't, I don't think Rosa Parks on the bus could have imagined in when was it? Was it like the 1940s that she would be inspiring a Swedish teenager in 70 years' time to start a global climate movement? And so I just think like it works when communities come together to fight for outcomes that they care about, and then find solidarity and intersection with other movements and campaigns. And that's what I like see happening in amazing ways all the time.
That's a beautiful answer. Thank you, Anna. I feel quite uplifted and inspired having listened to that answer. Thank you. Lawrence and Lavanya, what do you think about, you know, people power, and do you think that people power will get us to where we need to be? Are you hopeful?
Oh geez, trying to answer that one. As Anna said, that's a very deep philosophical question. I guess if the system's broken, I mean, sometimes our democracy is not the most democratic. Sometimes, you know, it's big pockets that get the say, but I mean, and I feel like us as people, we kind of fight against that. But everything in history, every big movement's been created by people. That's anything that can change the system. I mean, this is a bit of a cop out, but I just like, what else is going to work? Who else is going to lead the change but us? So that's my answer.
Thank you. Lavanya, a couple of words from you on, do you think?
Yeah, well, I actually, before we were talking about books we're reading, and I'm also reading Hope in the Dark by Rebecca Solnit right now, and I've only gotten through the first few pages, and it's already really inspiring. And like Anna said, it's, you know, like while we win a lot of things, we lose a lot of things. And when we talk about you know, climate action, if we only talk about in the lens of, we have to also look at the intersectionality and interconnected with all the other underlying social inequality, the racial inequalities that exist. And when we see ourselves as like a part of a broader social movement, we see that we have wins and losses, and we don't always just get what we want. But a lot of the times, a lot of people do. And people power is also just not, you know, not only about like you and your issues and what you're most passionate about, but more like how as a collective society, like what part do we play in the, you know, social imbalances of power and addressing the imbalances of power, and not just trying to win one thing just for our community, just for our families. So in that way, if we start looking at it like in a more broader, expansive way, we'll see like a lot more wins will start popping up, like little lights. And yeah, and the same with like with Rebecca Solnit, it's like hope doesn't mean that we're really positive, optimistic that everything is okay and everything will be fine. And it's not, we're not pessimistic either, because those people definitely don't create any change. But it just means to do it anyway. And for me, like the best part of it is every day, like you do this stuff and you don't know if you're going to win, you don't know if it's going to amount to anything, but you're meeting new people and you're connecting with new people, which doesn't happen in any other area with such a diversity. Like you don't just meet people, you meet people you never talk to. Like I talked to people in the Latrobe Valley this week and in Ballarat. And if you know, if like you know, if you don't get all the outcomes you want, you get that, and that is really valuable in and of itself with the community, like without wins. And there will definitely be wins, and they won't always happen, but they will happen. So
yeah, thank you. And I think, what's the alternative if we can't stop fighting and keeping, to keep trying for a better and safer and healthier future, because there's, what do we do otherwise? So, but thank you to the three of you, and I'd really and thank you for talking about the campaigns and the work that you're doing, which I think for all three of you span, kind of, I guess they're all statewide campaigns. I'd like to bring Carol in now from Yarra Climate Action Now. And Yarra Climate Action Now is our local climate action group in the city of Yarra. And I'd like, I guess, Carol to give a quick overview of what we term YCAN, and talk about some of the action that's really happening locally, and some of the, I guess, if people want to get involved in a very, very local group and some events and activities happening very locally, Carol can just give us a quick rundown on what's happening right here in the city of Yarra. Thanks, Carol.
Yes, thank you. So yes, we're Yarra Climate Action Now, YCAN, we're an independent community group committed to taking action, urgent action on climate, and also inspiring it in other people. We've been around since 2007. We're always looking for new members who live, work, study, shop in the city of Yarra. We're not fussy, some people we just sort of hit the spot. Some people don't, got a few members that don't live in Yarra, but our, excuse me, our level of campaigning is just what they're looking for. We lobby different levels of government, join in rallies when we can, and other actions organised by the larger groups like those represented here tonight. But I think our most successful engagement has been with the City of Yarra. For example, we have campaigned with Yarra City Council for them to develop a climate action plan successfully, and for them to introduce a food waste collection, which we went banged on about for many years and is finally happening. And we're happy to say that we are also now, having established ourselves, regularly asked for our input regarding Council's climate-related strategic decisions, and so that's pretty good. And it's a nice group. There's a sort of there's different levels. People can choose their own level. There's no pressure to do, to organise a big campaign. You can just sort of listen in and make the occasional thing. We write a lot of submissions to council. Seems to be, nowadays there's something climate related on the agenda almost every fortnight that there's a council meeting. So there's a lot to do, and we do have the ear of councillors and also council officers as well. And, we get invited to sit on committees and that sort of thing. So for some people, it's just the right level, very personal and rewarding. So if anybody's interested in finding out more about us, perhaps the easiest way is to subscribe to our newsletter, which comes out hopefully once a month. And you can find a link to that through our website, which is ycan.org.au. Or you can contact, you can nowadays, we're meeting on Zoom, of course, instead of a nice little cozy meeting room that we used to do, which we all miss very much. You can join in a meeting and just see how we, work through the myriad of things that have to be discussed, and try and work out a manageable program for us. So at the moment, obviously everything's online, and we have got our own series of webinars. You could also email me at Carol at ycan.org.au. Carol with the E on the end, if you want to just ask a personal question, not a personal question, but if you want to just a one-on-one question situation. But for me, I've been involved for a long time, and it is just right for me. You can be involved. You can, I've learned to sort of be more confident in giving submissions, to speaking to mayor and councillors, and you have those opportunities to sort of find your own voice, I think.
Lovely. Well, thank you very much, Carol, for the overview. And as Carol mentioned, it's a local group. It's very much focused on action within the City of Yarra, and it has a strong focus on advocating, to council for climate action. And Carol mentioned too that YCAN are running a climate solutions webinar series, and you can find out more about this series either on their website, which is ycan.org.au. Terrific, thanks Carol, or signing up to their newsletter, which you can also do via the website. So we're getting close to the end of the night, and I guess a couple of little things I just want to touch on before we close. And one of those things is, we've been talking about, I guess, climate action and climate activism tonight. And the City of Yarra has in the past and will continue to run webinars which focus on climate action and really supporting our community to come together and take collective action. We have run a couple of webinars very recently, one on holding or how to have a climate-focused conversation, and that included people from the Australian Conservation Foundation, Climate for Change, and Common Cause. You can find a recording of this webinar on our website. Similarly, we ran a webinar on using social media as a tool for climate action, and the comms coordinator from Environment Victoria ran that for us. So both of these webinars, recordings of these webinars, are on our website, which is yarracity.vic.gov.au, the usual council website, but /climate action. One of the other things to mention is that we really want to know what you're all up to. We really want to know what climate action you're taking, whether it's within the City of Yarra, it's across Victoria, it's in a neighbouring council. We really want to know what's resonated with you tonight and what action you're going to take. And we really want you to tag us and let us know what you're doing. So we've got a slide that we'll bring up with our City of Yarra social media tags. Perhaps that will come up very soon, but if not, we can put those social media tags in the chat function. Perhaps that slide is coming up soon. Maybe not, that's okay. We can put those tags in the chat function, and it will be in the information we send out at the, post this webinar. And I guess the very last thing to do is to thank our three fantastic panelists tonight: Lavanya Pant from Environment Victoria, Lawrence Newman from Australian Conservation Foundation, and Anna Langford from Friends of the Earth, for giving us great insight into the campaigns that they're involved with, and really giving us some very practical, tangible ways that we can all be involved in making sure that the pandemic recovery addresses the climate emergency and creates a safe, healthy, zero emissions future. And thank you also, of course, to Carol Wilkinson from Yarra Climate Action Now for the local view on climate action. So I think that's it from me, and maybe that's it from all our panelists. Thank you again to the panelists. Thank you to everyone for tuning in tonight, and please stay safe, and we look forward to seeing you at another Climate Action Forum very soon. Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Thanks, Sam. That was great.
Thanks, Carol. We'll just wait till we have just the panelists left, and then we can have a little chat, little debrief. It's just us, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, everybody. Thank you. That was fantastic. Thank
It was
you.
great. Yeah, really great.
Yeah. Yeah, I hope the questions weren't too kind of left of field, but you all did a great job of thinking on your feet and giving really brilliant answers. So thank you very much.
Yeah, definitely. It was really, really good. Yeah, great discussion.
Thanks so much, Sam. You're a great host.
Oh, thanks, Anna.
You're excellent.
Thanks. I'm, training up to be the next Hamish McDonald. That's my next career move.
We'll come out of ISO and the world won't know what's hit them.
Too funny. So, Lawrence and
Yeah,
Lavanya, was it all good for you? Anything that you think that we could have done better or we missed, or?
No, I think it was great. I really like the Q&A function. I've never used that before, and that was really good to be able to see the questions and also answer them live and type them out. That was cool.
Yeah, nice. Thank you. Yeah, it's because sometimes doing council things, I think I said, you can get some pesky questions with, so it's just a good way for us to kind of filter those out as well. And really focus on the questions that are really relevant to the night and the topic. So, yeah. So thanks, Danny. Thanks, Carol, for doing the back end stuff and making that run, super smoothly.
Yeah, sorry about the last slide. It's so funny because I'm clicking, I've got like 2 jobs to do, and all at once. And I just thought I'm not going to show it because all it is you guys and my screen and the PowerPoint. I don't know.
That's okay. Fine. I popped them in the
Kelly
chat.
Put them in.
Yeah,
that's okay.
Yeah, no worries. And especially when it's right at the end of the night, it was good timing, good wrap up vibes.
Yeah. So I'll send an email out to everyone who attended tonight, and I'll include all the links that everybody's put in, that you've all put in the chat, and links to kind of the actions that you talked about as well. And I'll include you in the email. So then if there's stuff that I've missed and you want to add or anything like that, then please feel free. That would be great.
Yeah, excellent. It was
nice
great.
One.
Really good compliment. Everyone's different. Yeah,
it's good, huh?
Perspectives. Yeah.
All right.
Good. Okay.
I'm going to go and have dinner.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
Just started.
Oh, your book club? Oh, you better go, Carol.
Oh, yeah. 3 minutes. 3 minutes overdue. Okay.
Yeah. All right. Night, folks.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks, Sam. Bye.
Oh, total pleasure. Thank you. Good night. Good night. Good night. Night, Carol. Have fun.
Good night. Oh, that was good.
It was, that was superb, Sam. That was excellent. Yeah.
Thanks.
Awesome.
Thanks.
It was just so calm and inclusive and articulate, and you're on top of it the whole time. It was really,
thanks. I felt so much better at tonight than
the other night. Night and day.
I feel better.
Night and day. So you can.
I don't have to have
easy about 2 nights ago. It had nothing to do with your
your
organisation or your performance.
Yeah, and I mean the speakers were great too. I just think that that sort of local action thing and having a few different ones that people can you know.
I only knew about Anna from the cultural forum that you guys did, Danny. I hadn't met or come across Anna before, but what a winner.
Oh, she's
It's
great.
very funny because we
her and Lavanya are both rock stars, I reckon.
Yeah, yeah.
Totally. Well, it's so funny because Anna was the last minute one that I got in because we actually had someone from EB locked in. So Nick was going to talk, and I know I've got a good friend, Tyler, who works with Lavanya and stuff. And but then once we kind of moved to online, then Nick was sort of just like, he was busy and stuff, and I was like, oh God, I need to get someone.
Yeah.
Googling around, and I just thought, I mean, Anna, you know, that when she was young, like she had a cafe job, she campaigned for union
good
pay,
wages,
you know, things like that.
fair wages,
and you just think, so great. And I just love people who are like, without being like, just, it's not, you don't go into anger or anything, you go into action, and just and really like in great ways. And I think they all touched on that, just that thing of people power and communities, and you know,
I was really
that was a good
session.
question to end on, I reckon, the thing about people power.
Yeah.
You know?
That's really great.
Yeah, it was so good. So
a couple of ciders for you, Sam.
Yeah, I'm going to watch the footy.
Rest easy.
I know. I'm going to watch the footy and have a cider.
Have a cider. Excellent. Get some takeaway in, you know.
No, Margie's cooking up a storm. I can smell the food coming under the door. Yeah.
And tomorrow night will be good. Little break.
It'll be great.
I feel like that makes us feel like, okay,
we're back.
Yeah. And, you know, we've been saying to ourselves, and now it's proved to be completely correct, as we thought. There was another factor. Everything's fine here.
Even in that, I was just thinking,
mute mush.
That's we didn't have to mute mush tonight.
And everyone just got it. You know, now is the time that we're about to start, and we just calmly, and then we start. Beauty.
So
lovely.
Next rally, we are all at a rally together. I am making t-shirts that just hashtag mute marsh.
Mute
and
marsh.
we'll be like,
what's that about? Yeah, can't say.
Wetlands, kind of like this survival thing about
classic.
But fabulous job, Sam. Really good.
No, it was superb. Really great.
It was good. I mean, and especially like with 3 speakers, you can just jump between them all. So no, it was takes me back to being a primary school teacher.
Very much on your feet and with Carol, and there's a lot going on there.
And Carol was good, you know. She handled all the tech and
definitely. And her Wycan spiel was terrific. Excellent.
And it was actually really sweet when you'd be like, oh, okay, Carol, do you want to read that? Because it just felt like it had that nice sort of feel where you've got other people coming in and reading. I don't know, it's sort of like
and I think she really enjoyed it. She seemed pretty happy at the end.
It's great. It's great.
So anyway, all good.
All helps build the relationship.
Cool.
Okay.
See you tomorrow.
Night. Yep.
All right.
Okay.
All right.
Bye.
Night. Bye.